just stop there and talk. Any questions? Any of you want to ask any questions about male and female deacons? Feel free. You're never going to offend me by disagreeing with me. If you want to ask something honestly, I'm happy to entertain it. Anybody? Yes, sir. Yeah, good question. So he asked, what about in a church where they have plurality of elders, they have lay elders, uh, and and the deacons are clearly not elders, but have a different conviction? Well, I'll put it this way: my answer would not be any different. I would still favor males in that role, but I think you can make the case better as a pastor because the likelihood of them morphing into elders is less. And you're clearly making a distinction there. So I think the likelihood of that trans transformation taking place is less. I still wouldn't do it, but I do think you have less danger. Yes, sir. Grab a. We got a microphone here. Uh, so yeah, why don't we start using the mics, and that'll help them and as well as me.
Is it important to clearly define or not define what tasks deacons are supposed to fulfill? Because there are some tasks that it's certainly not wrong to enlist ladies in the church, but if you define them, hey, this is a deacon task, then problems.
Yeah, that's a great question, and let me put it this way: I try and stay away from rigid definitions because I've just learned in church life there's always stuff that happens, and what I try and organize my church for is quick decisions and response. So I would not define the office of the deacon too much beyond the biblical thing. I meant, and I'll try and look up here in a little bit. I've got a little outline. I use it at a lot of our deacon ordinations, in which I just go through the purposes of the deacon. I talk about how there were different constituencies in the church, and that was the problem there in Acts 6. You had competing constituencies, and the purpose of the deacons was to cross those constituencies and bring them together. See, that's a nice broad definition. That's a broad thing. And you wouldn't say only deacons can do that. But, for instance, our deacons traditionally serve communion. But I'm not going to say only deacons can do that. There might come, we might have I don't know, smallpox or something to go through the congregation, and we got to pull other people up to serve or something. So I'm not going to say that's only a deacon's job. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay, that's a good question. So there are people, and so I'm going to talk here in a moment about divorced deacons and these other questions that come up. There are always people who are not qualified to have the office of a deacon who will then lament that they can't be a deacon. I've had wives lament that their husbands couldn't be deacons because of something. My response to that is I will say, now, are you troubled that you can't have the title of a deacon or that you can't do what deacons do? Because the reality is you can do the function of a deacon. Deacon is a servant. You can serve. And I don't think it's really a godly thing for you to just care about the title. So that's sort of my response when people say that. It's like, well, you can do it. The other thing is, I've not done this recently, and it sort of came up at our last deacons meeting. Our outgoing chairman was talking about his regrets, and one of uh, things that he wishes he had done as chairman, one of them was we're not doing enough to enlist and train up young guys to be deacons in the future. Uh, and that's a good concern on his part. I like our deacons to get what I call yoke fellows. So if each deacon gets a guy who is either a potential deacon eventually or someone who can't have the title because of, say, he's been married and divorced in a bad situation and some sin in his past that disqualifies him, but he's genuinely repentant and wants to serve, there should still be a function for him. And he could go along with a deacon who's doing his ministry. So we have our deacons, we have some deacons that go to the jail every Thursday night and do a Bible study. And our deacons faithfully do that. And we've got members that they led to Christ in the jail that are now faithful members, come every Sunday because of their witness. Well, we'd be foolish to say only deacons can do that. That's our deacon's job. And we would be wise for those deacons to recruit others to come along with them and to help them do that. So we always want to be doing that and bringing them alongside. And if someone says, "Well, if I can do that, then I ought to be a deacon." Well, in a sense, you are. There's the technical use of the word deacon and the non-technical use of the word deacon. So diakonos was long used, and even after Acts 6, well, it's not used as a noun in Acts 6, but it is in 1 Timothy 3. You see the use of diakonos used just to mean servant. You know, in Romans 16, Phoebe is called what? All right, how do you translate it? It's interesting. I preached yesterday at the end of Ephesians 6, where Paul mentions Tychicus, the beloved diakonos. Guess how many translations translate that as deacon? 0. I found one, not a reputable one. I forget what it was, not one I'd even heard of before. So I did on Logos a comparison, and I found one really obscure translation that translates it deacon. Now do that with Phoebe in Romans 16 and see how many come up, deaconess. And yet it's the same thing. Why would they not do it with Tychicus in Ephesians 6 and insist on doing it with Phoebe in Romans 16? So it's this, they're just, Paul's using the word in a non-technical, non-office sense of Tychicus and of Phoebe. I mean, these are servants. Are there people at Buck Run that I would call real servants of the church that are not deacons? Absolutely. But in Greek, you got the same word. And it's this context and usage that lets you know. So I believe in males being elected as deacon. I don't fall out with brothers. I would not exclude a church that does it. But in a church where the deacons function as de facto elders, if there were women in that role, then I wouldn't go to that church with them in any way thinking that I was going to live with that indefinitely. I would tell the committee I intend to change that eventually. And I know of some churches that are like that. So other questions about deacons? Yes, sir. Come to a mic. There's a mic right there. What time do I need to break? Go right ahead.
How do you run the elections without the steps, the election progress?
So how do we elect deacons in our church? Okay, so at Buck Run, to be a deacon, you have to be a male over 18 years old, a member in good standing for more than 1 year. All right, so we just compile a list of all of our male members who meet that standard. We tell anybody who does not want any men that would be on the list, but they would not serve as a deacon, remove your name. So a few weeks ahead of time, we put that list out, We ask, help us if we've made any omissions, or is there somebody on here that wants to remove your name? I will. Our pastors will meet before we publish that list. Let's say I know, like I know this guy had an affair last year. It wasn't public, but he's not ready to serve as a deacon. He needs more time between him and his sin. I'll just quietly remove his name. And if he wants to talk about, which I've never had anybody come to me and say, "Hey, why'd you remove my name?" They know. If I take it off and we don't make a deal of it, we just take it off. So there's things that I know that the general church would not know. So between the pastors and then publishing the list in advance, then we come up with the list from which people can choose the names. We ask our people, because there's so many men on that list, to come in with the list of who you want, and then our church has quarterly business meetings. We meet on a Sunday night. We call them family meetings, and we conduct all of our business in that quarterly business meeting. And in our November business meeting, we present that list, and we give people time to vote. And this year we elected 13. Turned out actually 14. We had one deacon resign who still had part of his term left. So that's how we do it. Does that answer the question? Other questions? Anything any of you guys think I need to add about our deacons? Yes, sir.
This is something that you mentioned earlier. I was just wondering clarification on the discernment with the gentleman who went kind of over your head with the deacons before. How did you try to go about befriending that gentleman? And how do you befriend someone well when you have to say no to something they're deeply committed to? And how did you lead the deacons in that process as well?
Okay, great question. So again, I hold them to the same standard I ask them to hold me to, and that is, can you trust my heart? So people at Buck Run are welcome to disagree with my decisions, so long as they trust my heart. They believe I'm trying to do the right thing. If you ever get to the place where you think I'm not even trying to do the right thing, I'm doing it for my glory, for my good, if you think that of me, we need to part ways. One of us needs to go. I hold them to that same standard. So this guy had proven for his adult life, this guy loves the Lord Jesus. He loves the Lord's church. He wants to do something great for the Lord. Part of it was selfish only to the degree that he wanted to see this thing built before he died. He's old. And he is a man of great faith, and he was a doer. He's just a guy who he didn't sit around talking about stuff. He made it happen. Now, everything in that is a good thing. None of that is bad. And he kept, you just need to do something. If we, he didn't blame me entirely. He brought the whole church in. He's like, if people would do this, and if they just would be serious about it, if they not be so selfish and spend so much on themselves, everything he said was true. Just not going to happen just because he says it, though, right? So he is my friend. Many times he'd come to me with ideas, and I'd shoot them down. I mean, because I would have frank discussions with him. I'd say, here's the thing. He said, I'm the guy that has to go to bed with this every night. So if I lead us into this massive debt, I'm the one who bears it more than anybody. If you do it, if I do what you say and then this thing goes south, you can join another church. You can say, well, they got in too much debt, and you go join some other church. I'm the guy that led us into it, and I just don't take that lightly. And I would have those kinds of frank discussions with him. Yeah, well, and then he tells some story about, he had helped plant another church in Frankfurt years ago, and what they did and how much he gave. All that, all of it good, all of it true. So I trusted his heart. He's not He's not wanting to worship Dagon. He's wanting to build something for the glory of the Lord Jesus. And he just got tired of waiting. And so when I said, he came to me with this plan, what we needed to do, I said, yeah, I just don't think that's what we need to do. Well, I'd like to at least talk to the deacons about it, see what they think about it. Now I could have said no, and he'd have taken it. He wouldn't have liked it, but I mean, he'd have taken it. His son is a deacon. His son-in-law is a deacon. But I know them and I trust them. And I was never worried that he was going to go in there and persuade them to do what I knew we didn't need to do. So I had nothing to lose. I reached the decision that this is really the way to deal with him finally, and it was. He's got nowhere else to go. He respectfully asked me if he could do it. He sought my permission to go around me. I gave it, and before the deacons, I treated him with respect, honor. I let the chairman presented it. You know, I'm trying to avoid using his name, but everybody at Buck Run would know it. And I'm not saying anything that he himself wouldn't agree to. I mean, I honored him in it. He's an honorable man. So I don't look at it like he was insurrectionist or anything. He wanted to do something great for God. And so when the chairman introduced him, brother so and so here would like to present an idea to us. He did, and it went exactly like I knew it would go. And he was somewhat satisfied. I will tell you, the whole time we're building, I'm praying, Lord, keep him alive, keep him alive. Because I want him to have the joy of being in that building. And he did, and he's still alive. He's still lived 2 years in. He's still there. He and his wife are in very bad health. They're wonderful people. They're godly. There's no part of me that resents him or what he did, and I think he did it well. I mean, I get that he was frustrated. He's a doer. Thank God. And if I had a church full of them, full of that, we could do a lot more than we do. So that's why I don't resent him. That makes sense? So that's the thing, guys. You really can't get upset with people because they disagree with you, especially when there are bad people out there, and they will wound you and hurt you. And that's why you really need to distinguish between the guys that you're pretty sure they're not even saved, and the guys like this that are either misguided, but they really want to do the right thing. They're not seeing the big picture. Maybe you know things they don't know, but they're not harmful. They're not, at least not intentionally so. They're not trying to wound. And you need to affirm them. And this guy loves me. His whole family loves me. His son and son-in-law, and they've just been incredibly loyal and faithful. And if I'd handled that some other way, see, honestly, his son and son-in-law, who were deacons, agreed with me. But if I'd treated their dad and father-in-law badly, even though they agreed with me on the principal matter, then they would have taken up an offense for the way I treated him. You see? So this is why you can't just have the right opinion. You got to treat people well and handle them respectfully. And even like he has gotten so frustrated with me at times, he has said harsh things to me. Okay? You can't do that back. You just can't. You can't afford to. They get to do that, you don't. And if you do, it's going to wound you, sometimes fatally, with your church. You just can't go there. Other questions? All right. You really want to get the deacons on your side. You want to work with them. You want to honor them. Let me tell you one little piece of advice in York's playbook. Don't tell deacon jokes. I hear guys make jokes about deacons, and the preacher's kids are bad because they play with the deacon's kids and that kind of stuff. I just don't do it. I don't ever do it. You don't ever hear me talk about our deacons with anything other than respect and honor, even playfully. And you know what? They treat me with respect and honor in return. So when we have deacons meetings, our chairman of deacons runs the meeting. He runs the agenda. I am an item on the agenda, senior pastor's report. I don't, it's not that I'm reporting to them because they're my bosses, but they're deacons because they are held in esteem by the church. So I don't ever make them feel like I control them. I ask for their agreement. I explain to them things that I'm doing in the congregation or that I'm going to do. Try and build consensus with them. And let me just tell you, if sometimes your deacons have to see that you are willing to lose. I'll give you an example. So at Ashland Avenue, before I went through the transition there, one of the things that also showed me I needed to change. American Family Radio comes to me and they say, we'd love to put a tower up on your property. And we'll pay you X number of dollars just to put this tower on your property. We had prime property in downtown Lexington. And this will give us a repeater station in Lexington. And in return, not only will we pay you, we'll give you a 60-second spot every hour. Oh, man. Now you're talking my love language. At free advertising. And every Christian that listens to American Family Radio in Lexington will hear Ashland Avenue Baptist Church every hour. I like that. A lot of what you got to do is just position your church in the minds of the community, not to try and entice them to come now, but so that in the future, if at any point, for any reason, they're looking for a church, yours is the first name that comes to their mind. And it's sort of just planting seed you'll harvest later. So I thought this was a great idea. And I take it to the deacons. I bring in this information packet from American Family Radio, tell them this is a no-lose thing. We're letting them put this tower up behind our building in a spot that we don't use for anything. Here's what we get in return: money, free advertising. How about it? And the deacons start looking at the programs that are broadcast on American Family Radio. And one of my deacons says, Pastor, they broadcast the Methodist hour. Yes. We can't do that. We can't do what? We can't broadcast the Methodist hour. Oh, well, we're not. We're not broadcasting it. The American Family Radio is broadcasting it. We're just letting them put up a tower on our property and getting advertising. Yeah, but it's the Methodist hour. Yeah, I'm like, okay. So our program, our Sunday morning service is broadcast live on WVLK, which is a secular station. It advertises all kinds of ungodly stuff, has ungodly music on it. You've never raised this objection about that. And you're offended that they broadcast the Methodist hour? Now, I didn't say it quite like that, but that was what I was saying. I said it nicer, not much. And I mean, I'm just like, I just can't even get this way of thinking. They're taking it like, yeah, if we put that up on our property, we're broadcasting the Methodist hour. They're Arminian, and yeah, but that's, yeah, I'm like, nobody's holding us responsible for the content of the Methodist hour. They just couldn't get past it. We debated this thing, it's always an hour and a half. And finally, the chairman calls the vote, and we vote, and it is split right down the middle, 50-50. And the chairman always votes with me, always. So he's going to cast the deciding vote and tip it my way, and we're going to do it. And I called timeout. Before Ken cast his vote, I said, I'm just going to withdraw this. We're not going to recommend this. They were stunned. And I'll tell you why they were stunned, because my predecessor would never do that. He was going to fight tooth and nail. And to him, you win by one vote. You know, what do they call the president, the guy who wins the presidency by one vote? Mr. President. That was his view. It's like, you know, doesn't matter if you one vote's as good as 100, you just win at all costs. He would never back down. And I withdraw even when it's going to go my way. And they were like, why are you doing this? And I said, if I can't get you guys behind this, I don't want this hitting the floor in a business meeting. You know, I would rather have a unified church than to have free advertising on American Family Radio. So I just withdraw it. I'm okay. This isn't essential to our mission. If this were about our mission, if this were about the gospel, I'd take one vote and go home. But I'm not. That's not what this is. So I'm just letting it go. Let's go home. I never, ever had a divided vote from those deacons again. From then on, they were always unanimously behind me. They were still in this kind of a mentality from Brother Range. Now, remember, I also replaced most of them very soon after that. But it did. It swung the tide quite a bit when they saw that I wasn't going to manipulate them. I was going to be honest with them. I was going to state my case, but at the end of the day, I wanted their consensus, and if I didn't have that, we're moving on. And it has worked well for me. You really got to let your deacons see that you're on the same team. You need them. You're going to use them. You don't resent them. You don't take them lightly. You don't dishonor them. And when they get with you and behind you, man, they're just going to take care of you. I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that I have deacons at Buck Run who would take a bullet for me. In fact, there was a time, it's too bizarre for me to tell you the whole story, but my life was being threatened. And I had a deacon buddy at Buck Run. Of course, I joke, we put conceal and carry permits in the new members packets. You know, it's just a gun culture. Everybody carries a gun. And, you know, I can't promise you that somebody won't come in and shoot me one day while I'm preaching, but I can promise they will not get out alive. That's just the way it is. And man, this guy, he came and he sat up on the front row beside me before I went up to preach. He kept an eye out. I've had deacons watch my house. They're willing to take a bullet for me. And I needed them. And there have been hard, difficult conversations. And man, God has used those men in my life. And we don't always see eye to eye. We don't always agree on everything. Part of the art of pastoring is knowing when to lay it down and say, I don't have to win. And you just get so much more credibility when you do that. So treasure your deacons, befriend them, use them, honor them. And I think God will pay you back many times over through their ministry.